Okay. Where is everybody? Nobody's coming into the room.
It's open.
Yeah, I opened it. Huh. That has never happened. That is really weird. Okay, I sent out a reminder today and everything. We had 27 people,
Okay.
so not a ton, but
Yeah, it's fine.
okay. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, my watch only, yeah, just at 6 now. So people might.
Okay. Huh.
I'll just, yeah.
I'm like, huh, what is going on? This has never happened. Hmm. God, I hope that people have the right. Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
here we go.
Okay, here we go. Here come the people. Yay. And we have a phone call in listener, so that's good. Okay. And we have Kim and Marnie, and the phone call person left. Hmm. No, it might be a small group tonight.
All right, we can get a good discussion going.
Yeah, we will get a good discussion going, and this will be recorded for the future, so that's good. Okay.
Jesse, can you
And
tell me if you see my window with our faces over here on the right-hand side of the screen?
I can see you. I cannot
Okay.
see me, but that's
So like if
okay.
I move this, does that move it for you?
I can still see you. It's all good.
Okay. I just didn't want it
Yeah.
because like if it blocks it for me, that's okay. I just don't want it to block it for anyone else.
Yeah. No, it looks good. It all looks good. We have some people here tonight. Okay, we'll give people a couple more minutes to come in. Maybe they were out doing Christmas shopping or something.
Enjoying the sunny day. Oh, now it's
Yes,
nice.
it was a beautiful day. It was such a beautiful day. Okay. Hello, everyone. Gonna give it just another minute. People are kind of trickling in this evening. But welcome. We'll get started in just a second. Okay. All right. Well, I think we will begin tonight's program. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. It's nice to see you. I see some Coast Watchers in the group, which is wonderful. My name is Jessie Jones, and I am the CoastWatch Programs Manager for Oregon Shores. And Oregon Shores' mission is to educate and empower people to protect our coastal ecosystems and communities. And Oregon Shores has a vision of a resilient Oregon coast where all people and nature thrive together. CoastWatch is a mile-by-mile beach adoption program on the Oregon coast. And we've been around for more than 30 years. We have hundreds of volunteers from Fort Stevens at the mouth of the Columbia River to the border of California, the Oregon-California border. And folks adopt a mile and they walk that mile sometimes once a month, sometimes 4 times a year. And they report what they find and what they observe on the beach to our website, where you can go to our website, and in the CoastWatch program, you can view years and years of CoastWatch reports from all over the Oregon coast. And tonight I am here with Rhiannon Bezor. And not only do we have a mile-by-mile observation program, which is not necessarily a scientific program, but we also offer and do recruiting and training for a lot of our partners who have community science and citizen science programs. And the Oregon King's Tides Project is one of those programs. We've been partnering with the Oregon Coastal Management Program for, I think, 14 years now. I think it's something, maybe 15. It's hard to say because we overlap every season it starts in October and it ends October-ish, November, and it ends in January. But we've been partnering for many years to bring an opportunity for volunteers to take photos of the flooding ocean on the Oregon coast. And you're going to learn a lot more about that tonight. This project has a number of purposes. One is to educate about sea level rise and to help local leaders and people, visitors to the coast and residents of the coast, to learn about the rising tides and how they are affecting our communities, what they look like every year. Something that we've been saying for a number of years is that the high tides today, or the king tides today, are the high tides of tomorrow. And so you are here tonight to meet Rhiannon, to learn more about what the Oregon King Tides Project is, and also to learn about how to participate in the program if you haven't already, or if you have before and you just want to, get some more information. So thank you again for being here, and Rhiannon. She is the Coastal Shores Specialist for Oregon Coastal Management Program. She is wonderful to work with. I'm happy to have her here. I'm happy to be working with her for the last 2 seasons. And take it away, Rhiannon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. As like Jesse said, I'm Rhiannon Bazor. I am the Coastal Shore Specialist with Oregon Coastal Management Program, which is housed within the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. I also am the co-coordinator of the Oregon King Tides Project with Jesse. For the last 2 years, and prior to that, it was my predecessor, Meg Reed, who had led the project. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about why we even care about what king tides are, beyond the fact that they're very exciting and dramatic events to document and to view, and give you a little bit of background on sea level rise and how the two are connected. So I won't spend too much time belaboring this point. I'm sure that this is something that is very, at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Oops, sorry, going too fast here. So essentially, since about the Industrial Revolution, humans have been producing a lot of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And why we care about that is essentially that as the sun produces energy and that sunlight enters our atmosphere and warms our atmosphere and makes life possible on Earth, a lot of that sunlight is reflected off the surface of the Earth and bounces back out into out of the atmosphere into the outer space. But as we produce more and more greenhouse gases, they act as kind of a trap for a lot of that heat. And so as the heat is trying to make its way back out of the atmosphere, it is maintained within the atmosphere by those greenhouse gases and kind of bounce back towards Earth. And so as we see that, we see a very strong correlation between the amount of carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases and the amount of temperature change rising over time, which you can see in that right-hand graph there. And so that was measured at Mauna Loa on Hawaii over a very long period of time. And we can see there's a very strong correlation between that CO2 and the amount of the temperature rise over time. And so as the temperature of the atmosphere rises, we also see the temperature of the oceans rise. And as the oceans get warmer, we see something happen called thermal expansion. And this is basically just that as water heats up, it gets warmer and it gets those energy molecules start to get more excited and take up more space. And so the warmer the water is, the more space that it takes up. And so this thermal expansion is basically the largest driver of sea level rise that we see. And so we also see other things impacting the amount of sea level rise, such as the amount of ice that's on land that melts. So again, as the temperature of the atmosphere warms, We're seeing increased melting of that land ice. That water is then going into the oceans and also raising the amount of sea level that we see along our coastlines. So how does that sea level rise and climate change impact us here on the Oregon coast? Some different ways here. You can see in the pictures as well. So I'm just going to move my little camera here. Um, so we see with an increased amount of climate change, we see increased storminess along our coasts. And so with those storms, we see floods, flooding events, more erosion along our coastlines, more landslides, and even more severe winds. We also can see things in the ocean themselves, so not even just onshore, but offshore, such as low oxygen events, which can cause changes in the marine ecosystems. And so we can see things like reduced shellfish productivity from ocean acidification as that's warming and changing the chemical composition of the oceans, and things like hypoxia, so these real low oxygen events. And so this can impact our fisheries, it can impact our coastal ecosystem and our ability to, produce our own goods and trade. We also see a migration of people from different climates towards the coast. So maybe more extreme areas where they're experiencing more extreme effects of climate change. They might want to come to the Oregon coast where, the climate is still fairly temperate. And we refer to these people sometimes as climate refugees. So they are going from one area to another based on the effects of climate change. And so that can also put stressors and, increase impacts on our coastal communities, as we already are kind of facing this, limit on development and space and where we can house people. So that can add to that effect as well too. And then what we're here to talk about tonight mostly is sea level rise. So some of the impacts from that we can see along our coast are things like impacts to our infrastructure, development, impacts to estuaries and the species that live in them, and our water supplies as we have things like saltwater intrusion into our water infrastructure. So there are a lot of different ways that climate change can impact us here. And again, one of the big ones that we're focusing on tonight is sea level rise. And so in addition to those things like thermal expansion and melting of sea ice, we can also see some influences on how sea level rise will impact us here in Oregon based on other climatic events such as El Nino. So during El Nino years, we see even higher than normal water levels during winter. We see higher wave energy, which then leads to more coastal erosion. We also see a shift in the way that the waves are approaching the land. And so that can impact different areas that maybe are less affected by erosion usually. And as we see a warming climate, we're expecting, based on models, to see more of these El Nino type winters as well too, based on different currents changing in the oceans and different atmospheric patterns as well too. So we might see more of these events going forward. And right now, along the Oregon coast, we are significantly less impacted by sea level rise than a lot of other places. If you think of places like Miami or Charleston in South Carolina or Norfolk in Virginia, where they're seeing a lot of impacts from sea level rise already, and they have, tidal flooding daily or more than once a day, and seeing a lot of impacts from sea level rise already. Here on the Oregon coast, we have a significant amount of vertical land uplift because we are along the Cascadia subduction zone. And so as one plate pushes down, it's pushing us on the coast upwards. Were we to see a large Cascadia subduction earthquake, then we would basically have a land motion going downward. So we would see a significant change in the position of our coastline, moving downwards rather than being pushed up. And so at that point, we could be much more impacted by sea level rise as the land would subside pretty significantly. So that is something that, is being modeled by scientists as well and taken into account for future sea level rise. And then we also have things on a little bit longer of a time scale than El Nino, which is generally like 7 to 10 years that we see those events. For Pacific decadal oscillations, though, these are these warm and cool periods that we see on an order of 20 to 30 years. And so, a lot of development along the California and Oregon coasts were built in the 70s, when it was a fairly cool period for the PDO, as they call them, cycles. And so it was less stormy. There were the water levels were a little bit lower, and so a lot of development along the coast was put in, thinking these are pretty stable conditions. And then we entered in the 80s and 90s into a warmer period, and those water levels went up. We were seeing a lot more El Nino events and higher water and stormy levels. And so we started to see a lot more erosion during those times as well, too. So that can play a significant factor into the effects that we see from sea level rise, too. But overall, for the Pacific Northwest region, we have sea level rise projections on the order of about 0.5 to 5 feet by 2100. And I do recognize that that is a fairly large range. It does matter where along the coast you're talking about. Some areas have more tectonic uplift than others. Some areas see more ground subsidence based on things like, either tectonics or groundwater pumping. A lot of the geography will just depend on that for what that range is. We also, those projections take into account different scenarios for how fast those glaciers and ice sheets are melting, and for how much we're seeing atmospheric CO2 increase and things like that. So there are a lot of factors in play, and so the range may seem large, but we do know that there is going to be some impact from sea level rise that we're going to see within that range by 2100, if not sooner. So you've heard me talk about things like, beyond sea level rise, these El Nino cycles, southern oscillation. So if we take just sea level rise in and of itself, let's say even that 0.5 feet that was at the low end of the projection. Let's say then that we have that 0.5 feet during an El Nino year, during a warm PDO cycle, and then add on to that, we're in the middle of winter and it's really stormy. We're seeing increased storm events. So we're already seeing more waves, higher waves. And then you add on to that a king tide event. We'll get more into king tides in just a second. But it's important to think about the entire total water level during some of these events. So it's not just sea level rise at just the 0.5 feet. It could be 0.5 plus, the king tide, maybe an extra 3 feet, or coastal storm of an extra foot. So it's really cumulative, the impacts that we can see from these total water levels. So it's not just one individual component. You really have to take a look at the entire picture when you're planning for how sea level rise may impact us in the future. So what is a king tide then? So king tide is not actually a scientific term. We don't really use it in the academic world. We refer to them as perigean spring tides, but it's a colloquial term. We use it generally to describe when there are a number of conditions that are in pretty perfect alignment planetarily and that cause these really extra high tides. So when you have the sun and the moon in alignment with the earth, and the moon and its closest point in its orbit to Earth, and the Earth and its closest point to the sun, we have what is called perigee. And so it's these perfect setup of alignments and positions of the sun, moon, and Earth that mean that there is an extra strong pull on the Earth's tides. And so we already have high tides and low tides every day, but during these events, which do happen during summer and during winter, but we see the strongest effect from king tides during winter, you get these really extreme high tides and low tides. And it's just, again, that extra gravitational pull from this alignment. The term king tide actually originated in Australia. In Australia and New Zealand and these other Pacific nations, they started to document that, hey, during winter when we were seeing these perigean spring tides, we're seeing a lot of impacts on our coast. We're seeing flooding, we're seeing extra erosion. And so they're naming these king tides because they're kind of, extreme and grand. Um, and they started to document them and have um, community science projects across the Pacific that ended up spreading worldwide, where people could take pictures and upload them and help document what these impacts look like over time in different locations. And so about 14 years ago, as Jesse said, Oregon started to join this King Tides project and started the Oregon King Tides Photo Initiative. So we do the same thing that they do down under there, and we ask participants to go out and very safely, we emphasize safety always, take pictures of their local coastal areas, or if you're visiting the coast, anywhere that is subject to these king tides. So it could be bays and estuaries or beaches or river mouths. Take photos and upload them to our website. And then they are entered into a photo contest for chances to win prizes for different categories, which we'll go through in a minute as well too. And we generally ask that pictures are taken in a way that they can be gauged against familiar landmarks. So if there's a building or a jetty or a bridge or a seawall or anything that helps kind of show us where that photo is, and so we can compare it to what that area looks like under normal conditions or a normal high tide, those are really helpful pictures to us. So any kind of landmark is really great. Again, safety measures are highly encouraged. We saw in the last King Tides event series in November that there were a few instances of some not very safe measures being taken on the beaches. And I know there were some videos that went viral. We're really trying to avoid scenarios like that. So, we really emphasize to follow all safety measures, make sure that you're a safe distance from the waves. Keep in mind that waves move extremely fast. During winter, we have sneaker waves that, the conditions can look very calm and safe, and then suddenly you're hit by a sneaker wave and being washed out. We don't want that at all. If there are any signs up for road closures or beach closures or accessway closures, please respect those. Be really mindful of, not turning your back on the water or putting yourself or your loved ones in danger. So that's our safety message, but we really want to emphasize it every time because it is something that needs reminding for people. So how do you submit these king tide photos that you take safely? We have our Oregon King Tides Project website. So the link is up here, oregonkingtides.net. And I will show you in just a second, but this is our landing page for the website. Let me bring up the website right here so we can see this. All right, so from the landing page, you're able to learn more about the project, submit your photos. You can explore photos that have already been submitted. We always have the next King Tides series up here. As I mentioned before, we do have a photo contest running. And so this year we have 4 categories for the project. One is coastal flooding. So any areas that are, prone to flooding, those are great shots. Coastal erosion and wave action. We do get a lot of photos of, really large, really exciting waves, and that is great. But we do want to focus more on the impacts on the coast. And so if it's a wave causing the erosion or up against the bluff or the cliff, then that's really great. The open water large waves are a little bit less impactful for helping us document the coastal impacts. They are very exciting though. We also have a category for comparison shots. So if you take a photo or you have a photo at a normal high tide, an average high tide, and then during a king tide so that we can compare those. Those are really helpful as well. And then anything, any photos that you have for bays and estuaries during king tides, we're also looking for this year. And so for our photo contest, there will be a winner chosen in each of these categories. And we choose the winners along with our partners at the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. And this year, the prizes will be an electronic gift card to their website. And so we have winners each year, like I said, and we post all of our photos, the winning photos, and all of the photos on our Flickr account, which you can access through our website, or if this lets me do this, or on our Flickr account here. I'll just show you some of our photos from last year so you can get an idea of some of the different types of shots. So flooding, waves, Depot Bay is always a great shot. This is actually from this year. Someone posted this of their, they were impacted by a sneaker wave. 4 acres is always great. And being mindful of the signage is very important. So we have photos from all of our previous 14 seasons on here, and so you can go through the albums list. We have the finalists and the winners on there as well too. So you can see, different areas that you may want to take photos of. We also have on our website how to participate, so some more information about the photo contest. One of the more useful tools on here as well too is our tide map. And so we have all the tide predictions, so you can find peak high tide for wherever your closest tidal station is. This is for Depot Bay. So you can see on the 13th, we have a king tide in these orange colors here. And it looks like it'll be peak high tide at 9:34. And then on the 14th at 10:20 and 11:06 on the 15th. And so you can do this for any of your different tidal stations, find wherever's closest to you. We also have events listed on here as well too, including tonight, as well as previous events. And then if you're interested in a little bit more information about what king tides are, we have an about page as well. And then I'll show you quickly the submission form. So it's a pretty easy process. You can upload your photos from your phone or from your computer or tablet or whatever you have. So if you want us to be able to use the photos, let's say in something like a webinar like this or on our social media accounts, you can click yes for the photo permissions. If you'd like to be entered into the photo contest, you can click yes or no, up to you. If you would like to have photo credit so that we can credit you whenever we do use the photo, you can enter your information. You don't have to have your full name or anything. You can put your Instagram handle or whatever you would like. And you upload your photo. And then you enter your location. And then we ask some information about the photo. So if you have this information, either just off the top of your head or from your phone information or your camera, so which direction you're facing, when the photo was taken, and then some information about what's in the photo. So is it showing a bay or estuary, or is it more flooding and hazards? You can also put other and describe the conditions that you're seeing. And then a photo caption, and if you'd like to put a longer description as well, any information that you can provide to us is really helpful. And then if it is a king tide, an average high tide, or a storm event. And so our photo submission form is open almost year round, and so it doesn't have to just be king tides. Again, we're trying to document where these areas that are really prone to erosion or flooding or different impacts from sea level rise and king tides. And so, different conditions are still helpful to us, even if it's not during a king tide. And I will go back to the presentation now. Okay, So that's just how to submit. So again, very easy, and you can either submit it um, on your phone, it'll look more like this, or through our survey. Either way is fine. It all goes to the same place. And then after each king tide event, we do upload all of those photos to our Flickr account as well too. And so those will be continuously uploaded throughout the season. So again, some of the most useful information and photos include the date and the year, the time. The tide height is really useful as well too, if you know it, or if you know, if even if you can put peak high tide or low tide or anything about the photo, the more information is more helpful. This is an example on the right here of during an average high tide, so you can see no flooding, and then during a king tide, pretty heavy flooding within this intersection here. Some more examples of what to submit. So again, comparison shots are really helpful. This has some great landmarks here so that we can compare during average high tide versus king tide and just how much those impacts are affecting this area. This is a great shot as well too. So again, those comparison shots. You can see, I mean, this one on the right here in king tide. So this is during sunny conditions. This isn't even during a storm or anything. We often see the largest impacts from king tides during really stormy events as well too, because you have large waves, you have higher sea levels, and so that combined with king tides can really impact our coastal communities. But even just during sunny conditions, because these tides are gravitationally, driven, we can still see a lot of sunny day flooding as well too. And so that gives us a really good glimpse into what sea level rise conditions will look like in the future. So even if it's not stormy, during a normal high tide in the future, this could be what the conditions look like. So any areas that are already prone to these impacts during future sea level rise conditions, this gives us an idea, at the local and state government levels for planners, for scientists. It gives us an opportunity to kind of plan ahead for what some of these conditions might look like and start to, plan for adaptation and mitigation projects, maybe where to focus some more funds and research areas. Here's some more good examples. So coastal flooding on the left there, as well as a comparison shot. The middle one is, again, Depot Bay is always a really exciting place to go. So that would be waves and, maybe hazards and erosion, if you wanted to check those off on the boxes. And then on the right, that one could be, it looks like bays and estuaries, as well as access ways. So there are a lot of different opportunities to look at how these events impact our coasts. And then we have some useful links here. And so I know this is being recorded, and we can also send out the slideshow, Jesse, if you are wanting to do that too, so that people have these links. So again, our website is OregonKingTides.net. On Instagram, we are at Oregon King Tide, and then on Facebook, facebook.com Oregon King Tide. So if you look up Oregon King Tide, it'll have all of our information as well too. Flickr, Oregon King Tides, and then you can always email us as well too if you have any questions, or if you're having any issues uploading photos or anything like that, and we'll get back to you. We also get a lot of questions about where to go, what kind of shots are helpful. So if you take a look at our Flickr account or our website at those photos, you can kind of get an idea. If you're looking for somewhere that is guaranteed to be exciting, somewhere like Shore Acres or Depot Bay, great. But if you're looking to fill in some of those gaps, you can also look at the maps to see some areas where maybe less photos are generally taken or fewer photos, and help fill in some of those gaps. That's also really helpful. So with that, I will take any questions that anybody has or go through any information that I have left out, Jesse.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Yes, so I wanted some of those photos that you saw, everyone, and so there are bays and estuaries, but also consider the lower rivers, which aren't always a bay and estuary. So we have tidal rivers, and those are also important. I think the very first year we had the photo contest, somebody on a tidal river won the contest, one of the and it was a great photo somewhere down. I think it was actually the Siletz River. It was a covered bridge down there. So don't forget about the tidal rivers. And also, there are people who love to fill in. And so if you can't figure out the maps or you're wondering, you can always contact Rhiannon. And that was her email was the info at King Tides, or is it info? Can you write it in the
Sure.
chat?
Oh, sure again.
I have a couple of emails for you. So feel free to reach out to Rhiannon. And there's another one too. It's the info at Oregon King Tides. Is that right?
Yeah, so you're
But
welcome to email me directly, or you can email
oh,
OregonKingTide@gmail.com.
right. OR
Either
King
way,
Tide at Gmail. Yeah.
it goes to me. So
It goes
either
to
way,
her.
it's fine.
So either one.
Yeah.
And this is a great opportunity to just learn about tides itself, and to start to document in your community. And every time that we give this talk, and before Rhiannon, it was Meg, we would really like encourage people to go to those sites where you take the photos and at another time that isn't a king tide. Learn what that area looks like at a regular high tide, and then if you can, take a comparison shot. And I don't think that you have to have your old comparison shot. I think Rhiannon would be able to find that, right, Rhiannon? So like if somebody has a comparison shot, they don't need to send in the king tide shot too. They could just say this is a comparison shot of a previous photo that they sent in, right?
Yeah, that's fine. And again, all of our photos are all uploaded to our Flickr account. And so all of that is documented. We will retain that as long as, as we can.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and again, if you have those photos, you can submit them anytime during the year. We really only take it down the photo submission site for like a month or two when we're trying to or sorry, not even two, a month when we're trying to pick the winners, and so we don't want more photos coming in while we're trying
Right,
to pick a winner. But the
right.
rest of the time, the submission form is open, so you're welcome to submit photos as you take them or as you remember to.
Right, exactly. So even though we educate about the king tides in the winter, this project is an ongoing, all the time project. So if you are a coast watcher and you are out walking your mile, and let's say that you took your photo on your mile, or you're wondering what you want to do that day, and it's July and there's a nice high tide and you want to take a photo, go out and do it, and then you can send it in. Now, one thing to note is that in the winter, the highest tides are during the day, and in the summer, the highest tides are during the night. So we do have some pretty big swings in the summertime too. So, and in the winter. So, for example, you might know people that go out and do tide pooling in the wintertime at night. And that's because when we have a high tide or a king tide, we will often get a very low tide as well, but at night. And in the summer, that is switched. And so actually July wouldn't be a really great time to go out and get that high tide shot, but you could still get one. They're still helpful. But it might be at night, but actually, at night we have more light in the summer. So really any time of year is good to get a high tide shot. And to me, this project is really about those comparison shots. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, it's also about just seeing, wow, look at that. Look at this, look at this state park that's flooded. And that's another thing that we're looking at, looking to get more photos of state parks. So if you live near a state park, and if you're a coast watcher, you don't have to just take these photos on your mile. You can take them anywhere. You don't have to stick on your mile. You can go anywhere. So if there is a state park around you, and you're curious what's happening to that state park's parking lot or its buildings during the winter, go and take photos of that. If you've been curious about a bridge that you cross, or a river walk that you walk on, or even a highway where you've driven past, a river or a bay, and you're like, wow, what would happen during a king tide in this spot? Then go there. Be safe, of course, but go check it out. It's a really curious time for a lot of people.
And it's funny that you mentioned tide pooling because in other places, like in California, a lot of their King Tides project, because again, this is across many states and countries,
Mhm.
but in California, their King Tides project is focused more on the low tides and the tide pooling and those
Oh,
that the
interesting.
ecosystems that you can see there. Whereas we're more focused on the high tides, but it is important to note that these King Tide events are extreme high tides and low tides. And so,
Right.
you're welcome to take photos and submit those of the low tide events as well too. And that's, just as exciting and helpful for us too.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I get emails from a lot of projects in California, and I noticed that they are doing sea star surveys this winter. It's
Yep.
fascinating. And we focus on the summer. So, California, they don't get the really high tides like we do, except in northern, but we get some pretty high tides here on the regular. So it's very interesting from state to state, these community science projects that are happening. They're really happening all year long. And that's so interesting about the low tide king tides. But yeah, like I
And
said, it's a
in
great time to learn about the tides.
It is. And in Virginia, they were working with professors at Old Dominion University as well too to map future sea level rise with blue paint. Blue paint is called the Blue Line Project. So they mapped future projections, I think, for 2050, 2080, and 2100 during the king tides. And the king tides levels were almost up to, the 2050, 2080 lines and some of them were approaching, and so that
Wow.
idea of, like you said, the what we're seeing for impacts for king tides today will be the impacts for normal high tides in the future. And so yeah, it's just interesting to see how different states are impacted and how they're helping document them. So it's your commute or you're contributing to a really large community science project, so not even just within Oregon, but helping worldwide our understanding of what future conditions can look like. So it's a pretty
Mm.
awesome and really exciting opportunity, not just to get outside and see large waves and an erosion, but to help contribute to our understanding and our future planning as well too, and definitely helps out on a lot of different levels.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. And to me, that's one of the big parts about this is, it's wonderful when we do these talks and city leaders and community leaders and county leaders come and learn that what the Oregon Coastal Management Program is doing, and how they're doing it, and how citizens and all people are playing a role in documenting what's happening on the coast. And it is exciting, and it's really great to go and see those photos. I really love to keep track of those. It's a lot of fun. So check that out, and please share about the project with folks that you may know. And yeah, send them a link to the website if you think of it.
Were there
So,
any
does
questions
anyone
from
have any
the,
questions?
yeah.
Oh, any questions, or has anyone here been has anyone here participated before and want to share? Feel free.
Not yet.
Okay,
There's still
great.
time.
Yeah,
We still
there's
have
time.
and one thing I didn't mention, the next King Tides will be the 13th through the 15th of this month, so coming up this next weekend. And then I think the 11th through the 13th, let me double check that before I send you out on the wrong day, is of January as well too. And so you have two more times this time. Sometimes we see king tides, yes, 11th through the 13th of January. Sometimes we see king tides November, December, January, and February. Sometimes just three times. It just kind of depends. Again, these are just the highest high tides of the year. So it's not designated to any specific month. We just generally see them during the winter months. So each year we look at the NOAA tide gauges and we will put those online and share it with all of our partners and in our media releases. And so you can always keep an eye out on our social media accounts and just look at our website if you're interested in finding those dates in advance too.
Yes, and something else I want to mention before we close out tonight is that sometimes there are storm events that you think it's a king tide. So it'll happen in October and you'll be like, wait, this date was not on the website. What's happening? Well, that will happen. That happened last year, I think in October. There was a major storm. Some of you may remember, very high tides, a lot of flooding, and that would be a time to take pictures too. So you notice that at the end, like you saw, like it was like a king tide comparison photo or a storm event, I think was. And so those storm events are outside of the projected king tides, but they are still important because they could be a 10 or 12-foot tide, and we want to see that. This project wants to see that. So please contribute those as well. You're not just relegated to the specific dates. There, doesn't always play that way. So if you see that a high tide, a storm, it'd be a good opportunity to get out there, of course, safely and take some photos where you think there might be a flood or something. Please go out and do that.
And sometimes you'll see, or you will see, really high tides on either end of those, 3 or 4 days as well too. And so even if you aren't able to make it just for those specific days, if you get pictures on either end of those during those high tides, that's great as well too. And like Jesse said, last year there was a storm that wasn't king tides that had way more impact than our next one in November that was a king tide when
Right.
it was really calm and sunny out
That's
and
right.
very low wave energy, and it didn't even seem like that much of a king tide, but it was still the highest high tides of the year. It just makes a lot of impact on what the other conditions of the waves and the storms are doing as well too.
Right. Exactly. You get a perfect storm, so to speak. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. If you have any questions, please reach out to myself or Rhiannon. And thank you for attending. Like I said, share about this project with others. And yes, thank you for being here.
Thank you
We're looking
all.
forward to seeing your photos. Okay. Good night, everybody. Good night,
Bye.
Rhiannon. Thank you. Bye.